Thank you again for being with us. In our previous session, we opened the conversation on priming by asking, how far is too far? We explored the ethics of influencing user behavior and talked about transparency, consent, and the fine line between guidance and manipulation. We did say that the human person is at the center of it all. Today, we continue that conversation with the shift from the why we do it to the how well we do it. So we need to have factual, concrete data that are properly measured. Because even if our intentions are good, and mostly it is good, we still need to ask, is it working? So we all know cybersecurity is about managing risk. We discussed that this morning, not eliminating it completely. And good risk management means thinking in terms of likelihood and impact. So if we are using priming, whether that's nudges, reminders, or phishing tests, our goal is really to lower the likelihood of a breach by helping people make better decisions and ultimately lessen the severity of a cyber attack. But how do we measure that? It's all good sounding, right? But how do we measure that? Are fewer phishing links enough? Or do we need to look at something deeper, like faster reporting, better instincts, or small cultural shifts over time? As David said this morning, it's like a triage of our cybersecurity posture. So this afternoon, we'll hear from leaders in technology, law, privacy, and strategic operations. They'll help us unpack what effective looks like when it comes to priming and how to measure not just what's visible, but what truly matters in a company. So again, good afternoon. I'll jump straight ahead to my first question for all of you gentlemen. So about defining and measuring success in priming. So how do you define and measure success when using priming techniques in cybersecurity training? And which metrics or indicators truly reflect impact? Is it fewer breaches, change in behavior, or maybe how people perceive and respond to risk? Um, can you share with us clear examples of key performance indicators or metrics that can be practical for our audience? Thank you. I'll start with the expert, Rookie.
Good afternoon. There were a lot of words used today. There are two specific that I would want to concentrate on. First word is compliance. The second is resiliency. When we talk about cybersecurity, those two items have to be clearly defined. Compliance, it is static. It's a checklist, one that we have to go through, like a directive. Resiliency, on the other hand, is adaptive. We respond to certain situations, conditions, whether environmental, psychological, or situational. So those are the first two. Second, impact. How do we measure? Since this morning it was being made clear, there are three measures: behavior, conceptual or perception, and the third one is metrics. You made mention about how do we measure. Let's talk about behavior. Let's look at the organization. Where are we? How old are we? How many? How large? How small? And what is the understanding at every layer in terms of how they define, as what Abbott was saying a while ago, what do they understand when you talk about cybersecurity? We look at the metrics. Okay, let's talk about behavior. When we look at behavior, we look at how do we identify, how do we manage, how do we anticipate, how do we mitigate, and then the last one is how do we now, in return, respond to whatever it is that we discovered in the first four. And the gentlemen here, I think, will agree, conditions differ, dependent on situation of industry and company.
Thank you for that. And that wraps up our, no, just kidding. But that's a really amazing discussion from Rookie, right? Because two things, we have to have a baseline, and that's where compliance comes in, right? Just to know we are healthy, right? Just a checklist for that. But number two, there's continuous improvement because we have to grow, we have to improve. So thank you so much for that. I'll go next to the next gentleman, Attorney Bam.
Okay, I would like to confirm what Rookie just mentioned. Kinapi na lang eh. No? Okay, I would like to answer the question in two things also. Number one is, if the industry is heavily regulated, your success rating or your measure of success will be how often will you be cited for violating that particular regulation. If your industry is more on customer facing, and a lot of us here are in that industry, it would depend also on the customer satisfaction survey that you will run. Social media is so loud now, and everyone, even the minors, have their own social media accounts. And the moment they have reaction, whether positive or negative, it reflects directly to their contents. For instance, if you're in the industry of airline industry, if your service is not okay, you will see right away the effect. And you don't need to run a CSAT for that because you will see now how your customers respond. If you're in a heavily regulated industry like, I will not mention, but more or less, banks, financial institutions, the often your regulators visit you gives you an idea that you need to comply more. The number of invitation that you get from your regulators, two things will happen. It's either they will serve you coffee because they want to get your inputs, or you go there and bring your own coffee because you'll be ready to face sanctions. So I think those are two things that I can see where your measure of success will be as far as your compliance to cybersecurity is. That's all.
Thank you, Attorney Bam. That's also a great point, right? In heavily regulated industries, the company, for example, a bank, will tend to please two types of customers, so to speak. Number one, the regulator, and number two, its real customers. So there must really be a bridge between compliance itself, right? But will that compliance drive business value and will not curtail creativity within that highly regulated industry? So thank you, Attorney Bam. That's a really good point. I'll go to you, sir. Charles?
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you so much. So I was listening carefully with Mr. Abbott earlier, and I'd like to take one key takeaway that he mentioned, which is cultural transformation. If we talk about metrics, usually we talk about, he also mentioned earlier that we usually use technical terms like phishing simulation results, like first query reduction, whether the users are still clicking on a malicious link or whatnot. But at the end of the day, the metrics, the success metrics really relies on the obvious and what we really observe. So like what Sir Abbott mentioned earlier, if we see a cultural transformation within the organization, it will really change how everyone reacts. I'll just cite an example where, because in Infoblox, we usually tease someone. Let's say someone got an alert and he missed that. It's a form of a check of attack. Then of course, by having a culture where you miss that check, you're the one who got victimized, it will also spread to the culture of that company and also to the whole organization. So I think metrics is not just speaking on the KPI, the details, but at the end, it will really matters on the obvious part, which is transforming the culture of the organization.
Thank you. And that's very insightful because, as we've said, humans are at the center, and it's all about transforming people, right? More than like if you're hitting 50% successfully deferred phishing attacks, for example, within that phishing test, it's really about how the people will respond, right, and how they will change. Thank you for that, Charles. David, please.
Thank you. I'd like to share a conversation I was having with a customer yesterday. We were having a weekly cadence, and he heads the security operations of their institution. We were talking about specifically SLAs and metrics that are important to the company and to the security operations specifically. So, two things actually stood out for me. First, we would want to take a look at a very good false positive accuracy. Because at the end of the day, in a security operations, our responders would address all the alerts. And if you get a lot of noise, then you are spending a lot of time to low returns or less important stuff, which we want to avoid. So that for me requires the importance of false positive accuracies when it comes to detections. The second part is actually quite cool because when we were talking about it, we were talking, do we want to track when an issue is closed or when an issue is resolved? Because from a reporting point of view, you would want everything to be closed. But from a security point of view, your important metric is actually the time that it gets resolved. Because that's the time that the security risk for your organization gets reduced. So in that point, similar to how, with customer service, they have mean time to resolve or first time resolution in calls, what's important for security operations is the mean time to resolve.
Thank you so much. I was given a cue that because your answers are very good, we can wrap up this discussion. But, I'd like to go back to behavior, maybe just as a closing point. And I'll go to you, Rookie, just for as a closing. What challenges do organizations face in tracking behavior change over time? Is there a perfect formula? Should this be quarterly, annually, monthly? Maybe, and then we can go from there. Thank you.
On its regularity, Abet was pointing out this is a business function. It is not limited to IT. It is not limited to information security, not even HR. This is a holistic coverage. It is a business because one department, division, person affects the whole. That's number one. Number two, on its regularity, you will have to go back to the first, behavioral. Is it within your structure? Did you put it in? Did you put the measures? The mention earlier about restoration, the first one is actually, how quick are you to detect? How quick are you to mitigate, segregate? How quick are you to restore? But once you go back to the first cycle, how quick are you to adapt? So the changes in terms of structure will also mean measuring people. How are people adapting to those situations? Whether you have the correct hire, you have a job match, then it involves everybody and it does not isolate each one as an independent silo.
Thank you so much for that. Any event can be transformed really into an adaptive action plan, as you've said. Yes, we do respond, we do put mitigating measures in place, but we always go back because there's a human person involved. So thank you for that. So if our first panel was about drawing the ethical line, today was about asking, is it working? And you gentlemen have really provided great inputs on that. So we've seen from the expert sharings this afternoon that priming is not about manipulation, it's about early intervention. Just like what Attorney Bam said on privacy by design, the principle proactive than reactive is like that as well. It's about intervening as early as you can. And it's about helping people make better choices before small risks run into big problems. And for it to be meaningful, I think, just to summarize what you guys have said, it's really about defining and designing, based on your organizational structure, metrics that reflect real risk. Not paper risk, but real risk that your organizations face. As David said, priming acts beyond security, right? It is a business value. Attorney Bam also highlighted during his presentation how compliance checks can and should match business objectives, right? And connecting behavioral data to incident trends and not just awareness campaign is key, right? Jessica said earlier that data with context is, I think it's David who said that data with context is a necessary fuel for priming. And lastly, using continuous feedback, that adaptive mindset, right? Sometimes people stop at responding, but they have to adapt. And there must be continuous feedback. And as we said earlier, it takes a village. And it takes a village to change people. But I'd like to emphasize as a closing point that lines of defense should also come in, right? Priming sits across all three and not just in silos or siloed in operations. The first line, the operations, it empowers employees to be part of prevention. The second line, the compliance, kami ni Attorney Bam, we support risk and compliance teams in measuring behavioral control effectiveness. And lastly, the audit team, given the data that comes from the first and the second line, will have a more dynamic view of the behavioral links. So at the end of the day, cybersecurity isn't just about systems, it's about people. And what we choose to measure tells our organization what we value. And that's still people. So thank you so much, gentlemen. I won't let you go first. I think the hard questions are coming in.
That was a very good discussion and collaborative sharing of not just about security, but also ethics. And again, the floor is now open for questions. Can we show them Slido and the QR code as well? So while we're waiting for our participants to submit their questions, maybe we can use this time to further discuss the topic.
Yes, yes. I was actually about to ask each gentleman to say like what you perceive priming is and how effective measuring tools are in saying, okay, priming was the cause of that behavioral change. Maybe just a few lines on that. Thank you.
I'll start. Who amongst you here had experienced emails, phishing? Raise of hands. Okay, quite a few. How about cell phones, getting SMS messages? Yes, same. Now, behavioral is identifying before putting it into a policy. How do you now look at what is phishing? The second one, and more often than not, the senior executives are guilty at this. They get an email, they keep on clicking. So, if you want to be, one, compliant to cybersecurity, you also have to be adapting to become resilient. So, in terms of behavior, getting yourselves to do phishing exercises is one thing. But to be able to identify and how will you adapt when phishing happens? Do you send it to another person's email? Do you seclude it into a demilitarized zone? So these are steps that you take forward once you've identified. And then how do you respond to that? Once you've identified, then you adapt. Put it either into a policy, put it into a sequence. So this will now be part of your mantra moving forward.
That's great. It's also important to measure maturity, right? Because maturity does not happen overnight. It happens through a series or stages of growth. So, Attorney Bam?
For me, I could see that the priming exercise starts with first understanding why you are doing it, and then have the habit of doing it, and then put a discipline of doing it. Now, if you have the habit already and a discipline, no matter how intrusive your exercise would be, it may be intrusive to data privacy, it would be intrusive to space already. But for as long as the respondents or the people involved in that exercise had that habit and have that discipline and understanding, you would not have any issue of it's not working for us, it doesn't generate a good result, etc. So for me, you have to undergo that kind of cycle for your priming to work at the same time, get the full benefit of it.
It's very good. It's all about discipline as well, right? Growing into it is very important. I now have the questions on the screen. Maybe for David and Charles, you can address any one of those questions. Okay. When we say how quick is the response, are there industry standards that we can refer to? I think this is for David.
Okay. Ever since I got started into the cybersecurity industry, one of the gold standards of framework that we've been always looking at is the NIST cybersecurity framework. And when I look at that, and when you understand the facets of that where you take a look and assess the way you identify cybersecurity threats, the way you detect it, you respond, recover, and govern that, all these are facets and frameworks that's already laid out through that NIST cybersecurity framework. So I think as a benchmark was as a good starting point for organizations, take a look at measuring yourself against that standard.
That's really true. It's really about baselining, then measuring how your growth path looks like, right? In Converge, we did that. We did a baseline, and then we had a target maturity level that we wanted to
Yes.
achieve. So that's very good. Okay. Charles, maybe,
Yeah, I'll get the third one.
yeah,
Yeah, I think the third
please.
one is relevant to what we're offering. So, what action plan that will adapt to the computer illiterate, like the elderly, for example? So, I just wanted to quote the good gentleman on my left, which is attorney from Metrobank. So, he mentioned earlier that the BSP is actually, is it BSP attorney where?
Oh, I
they're-
thought you're asking if the data is in good hands in our bank.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm
Go
actually
ahead, go
using
ahead.
So there is a key takeaway as well where he mentioned earlier that BSP is mandating the FSIs, the banks, basically to remove the links, the clickbaits and all. So it's actually aligned to the initiative to protect the elderly people because without those links, without those clickbait, of course, they will not get victimized. But just to highlight what actually Infoblox can actually offer, yeah, just to a side note, we're actually providing a protective DNS where just a click, because usually the first query comes from the clicking on the link or any form of either an SMS or a website or an email. And what we're doing is actually to protect the users even without any security tools. So this actually promoting more better security posture for them. And it's not only applicable for enterprise, for a big organization, but in general as a Filipino community. So that's what we're doing. And what I wanted to highlight is that now that we're making sure that we are protecting the elderly people, we wanted to make sure that even though they don't have access to the tools that we're using and the advanced cyber protection that are available, there will still be a protected.
It's really very inspiring. It's actually technology with a purpose, right? Before, I think, maybe 10 years back, people are like using technology as buzzwords. But now, the real purpose is really coming out. So thank you for that, yeah. And thank you for helping our elderly. Two more. Okay. This is for Attorney Bam. Which proactive strategies best prime financial institutions' cyber defenses against evolving threats and regulatory pressure?
Let me digest it for a while.
Okay, yes.
Okay. Normally, I would leave this to our IT experts because this is something that talks about financial priming and financial institutions. But what I can say is that awareness or driving awareness to your people, at the same time driving awareness to your customers is one of the best strategy that you can do. You need to make sure that your people also would love to get the products that you sell, something like that. You cannot get a good number of customers if the chairman or the president, for instance, you're selling an X brand car, for instance, but your senior management is using a different brand. You're telling your people to be there at 8 o'clock, but you're going to the office at 9, right? So you sell a product to your customers, make sure that your customer base, a portion of it or a big chunk of it are your employees. So I think it's more on that side. No? It's more on the awareness. At the same time, you campaign what you want. No? So if you talk about cybersecurity, you cannot say that your data is in good hands if your employee itself, your pool of employees, doesn't know how to take care of data. So, of course, there is no perfect institution for that. No? Financial institutions, whether in other industries. But as much as possible, your management or your company is aware and have that kind of mindset that we are, for instance, zero tolerance on breach. It's not we are accommodating breach at a certain level of risk appetite. When you say zero tolerance, whatever happens, whether it's incidental or inadvertence, you can just explain, this is one of the isolated cases that we encounter. So I think that's one way of putting it.
Actually, that reminds me of Converge Old Vision, delighting customers by taking care of our own. You have to take care of your people internally and your customers externally. Thank you for that, Attorney Bam. Okay, and maybe last question. How do you measure the effectiveness of your proactive defense against zero-day attacks beyond traditional metrics? Any one of you can take this on, please. Rookie,
Well,
thank you.
First, you'd wish you're not attacked. But if that happens, metrics is out the window. Your response is based on how prepared your team is to identify, first and foremost, to be able to manage the attack vector itself, to handle whatever came in. How do you protect your data? All these steps will manifest after. If you get attacked and you're not, and all those factors are not in place, then rest assured it will go deeper. But if you're able to identify these matters, establish your baseline. We talked about behavioral, we talked about perception, we talked about metrics, but the end state is adoption. What did we do after to prepare? Once we're ready, the only time we'll know for sure, doing a red team, blue team exercise is nice, but threat actors don't play that game. So once you get hit, you'll know how far ready you are once you get hit.
Thank you for that, Rookie. And I think that concludes this panel discussion, right? But to me, just to summarize, measuring the effectiveness is very important. But first, you must have a baseline where you can grow from, because it's all about increasing maturity. Find the right data that can fuel that growth, and lastly, transform with a purpose. And adopt. So thank you very much, and good afternoon to all of us.
Thank you.
That is it for our panel discussion.